receive your feedback and learn more about how we can tailor our solution to better fit the needs of the IQMS community. So with me today, my name again is Tanya Kennedy. I'm the Vice President of Sales with Global Software. And we also have Sherry Puckett, who is our Senior Director of Solutions Enablement. Sherry is a CPA by trade and has worked with many of our IQMS customers and other customers in various ERPs in implementing our budgeting solutions. So we're very excited to have her and leading through the product side of the demonstration and to elicit your feedback today. And just to refresh your memory, of course, Spreadsheet Server, that is the reporting solution that the IQMS customers do utilize to automate their use of Excel with the IQMS ERP platform. And most customers are utilizing it for general ledger-based reporting, but also operational analysis as you move outside of the general ledger, which, again, Spreadsheet Server is the flagship product of our Excel automation suite. And as part of that, some of you may be leveraging the distribution manager capability as well and automating the sending out of those reports. There are two other components of our Excel automation suite, and the solution again today we're going to show you is our budgeting solution, which is, you'll see, is called Enterprise Budgeting. And it automates the compilation and the consolidation of your budgets from within Excel. We also have a cloud-based version of our product as well, so if there are scenarios in which you have consumers of information that need to receive reports in the cloud, maybe from their mobile device or what have you, that is another solution we can bring to round out the offerings of Spreadsheet Server and how you may be deploying that today. So again, Enterprise Budgeting, it is going to leverage Excel as your budget tool. And it's going to streamline that process, give you greater control of your budgeting process while still leveraging Excel as your front end, leveraging the budget templates that you may already have today, but incorporating some automation around that as well as some version control capabilities. And at the end of the day, between the combination of leveraging Spreadsheet Server with the Enterprise Budgeting product, you can utilize Excel to dynamically pull your actuals versus your balances that may be in IQMS, while also accessing your forecasts and what have you that you may have stored within the Enterprise Budgeting product. So I believe Sherry has a few questions, if I'm right, Sherry, that we wanted to pose to the group here. We do want to make this interactive, and we have, I believe, about 7 attendees, so depending on the comfort level of the group, certainly we'll welcome some interaction, and if we want to unmute our phones, and we certainly can as we go through. But please take a look in the right-hand window, the chat window, you'll see a few questions. So if you can respond to these, then Sherry will be able to do a better job of tailoring this presentation for you.
Yeah, thanks. So the first question that we wanted to know is, are you using Excel today as your primary budgeting tool? If you are using Excel, then I think you're probably in the right place in terms of finding something that can help you. So that is a good framework for us to help tailor the presentation today. Okay, so looks like we got a good portion of the attendees are using Excel. We've got some that say no, they're not using Excel. Maybe we can chat later and get a better understanding of maybe some of the tools that you're using as well. I think we'll go ahead and ask the next question, and let's see what kind of responses we get. Okay. And one thing that's really important, especially as you're planning to roll your budget out, one of the things that Enterprise Budgeting can do, and basically you may hear us call it Budget Accelerator as well, because it is within a transition right now. But, we need to know as we're rolling it out, are you doing your budgets from a top-down or from bottom-up? And a lot of times you may do zero-based budgeting and things like that. So some of the examples that we'll talk about today, hopefully I can show you examples of both, but it's good to know what you're doing out there. Okay, so we have, I guess, bottom up and then top down. A good mix, I think, there. So hopefully then, like I said before, once we go through the demonstration, I can show you some of the things that the solution can do to help you with both types of those scenarios. Okay. So if you want to go ahead and put out the next question, and I'm just writing some notes here, so I'll stay on track. Okay. And this is more related to how you're budgeting. Are you budgeting your revenues and expenses by GL account segment, or are you actually budgeting by product or by SKU? There are a lot of different options there. And then, you know, once I can get a feel for how you're doing some of that, then we can you know, give you some good examples of how you can accomplish some of that. Okay.
The results are coming. It's going a little bit slow.
That's fine. But again, we do appreciate you guys giving us the feedback, and hopefully as we move through the demonstration, we can make it meaningful. So right now, expenses, both, and then, okay. So I would assume then more than likely that the revenue planning is probably done at a more detailed level. And then since we have both, then it's a good portion that probably does summarize to the GL. Okay. So Chloe, I guess go ahead and if you'll send out the next one. Okay. And this is really important, especially as it pertains to the budgeting tool. We actually allow users to store many different versions and revisions of their budget so they can compare different scenarios, different assumptions, different drivers, store all that information and be able to retrieve it in Excel just by using our formulas. So if you have that ability today, it's really nice to know if you're taking advantage of it, or if you're just trying to kind of do that in Excel, sometimes it's a little bit difficult. So this will be some really good feedback.
There's some lag time with the results again, sorry.
No, that's fine, Corey. Thank you. Okay. So I guess right now it looks like a good portion that may be a challenge to do those comparisons of actual versus budget, and especially if you're budgeting at a more detailed level than, say, what you would store at in your GL. So appreciate that feedback there. Let me write down my quick notes. Okay. I think we have got, what, 2 more questions? Is that right, Chloe?
That's right, yep.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay, great. And so this is kind of back to that same type of question that we just talked about. Are you able to do those comparisons? But a lot of times you may have different versions and revisions of the budget. You know, you have to present 2 or 3 different ones to management before they approve maybe the budget that you're going to manage to, or the budget that you're going to tell the street, or maybe there's another budget that you want to tell the board about. So just to get an idea there, that's really, really helpful. Okay. All right, well, I'm not sure, Chloe, if the next one would go out. Okay, there we go. Yeah, and this, I guess what probably should have lined it up a little bit better. This one really goes to your materials, your revenue planning, different items like direct labor. But are you using additional models in there? So are you using volumes to determine what your direct labor and material costs are going to be? Thinking of drivers, things like that. So just keep that in mind, you know, as we kind of move through the demonstration too. If you're using things like that, we can incorporate it into the modeling with the enterprise budgeting or the budget accelerator tool. Okay. So, yeah, it looks like a good portion of you are doing that for sure. So we'll talk about that and just really discuss some of the capabilities of how this can work. Okay, so I'm the presenter. Great. Del, Tanya, did you want to go through slides, or was I supposed to be doing that before? We talked about
well, I actually had already walked through some of those slides, Sherry, so no worries.
Okay, good.
Maybe I wasn't sharing my desktop at the time. Hopefully, I think we should probably just jump into the product if I had forgotten to do that.
Yeah,
but we're happy to send this along to you guys after the webinar as well. We're happy to send this PowerPoint presentation for your reference, if that would be handy for you guys.
Okay. All right, well, great. Well, thanks, everyone. I appreciate the feedback. And as I move through the demonstration today, just to give you an idea of some of the capabilities that we have with our budgeting solution, I'll try to incorporate examples based off of the responses that you've given us. Okay. Well, enterprise budgeting itself is an add-in to Excel, just like Spreadsheet Server. And that little button is in my way. There we go. So it has its own ribbon. And in addition to that, it has different capabilities that you can allow your budget users to take advantage of in their Excel spreadsheets. Really what we try to do is to leverage as much of your budget templates and your budget process as we can so that you don't have to redo everything that you've already done. A lot of times what you've built works just fine. I think what we do find are the challenges that, you know, protecting the integrity of the spreadsheet, making sure that, you know, you don't have users inserting rows and columns, things getting out of alignment, calculations that, you know, get kind of messed up with just changes within the various workbooks. So what we can do with the enterprise budgeting add-in in Excel is we can create models, we can distribute those models, and then put those controls around the workbooks. And then in addition to that, we're also going to allow some tracking to see who's completed their budget, things like that. So I guess one of the key differences with enterprise budgeting is it does require a server. When I say that, it's very flexible in terms of you know, what kind of server it requires. It could be an Access database. It could be a SQL Server database. It could be an Oracle database. You could literally put it on your Oracle database that your IQMS system resides on. So it's extremely flexible, and it's all self-contained, and everything works through a database manager. And we'll talk about that towards the end. What I'd like to do, though, first is just kind of step through the features within Excel and what some of the items do for your individual users. Okay. So before I get started, I just wanted to give you an idea of what we're looking at here. So this is a budget model workbook. In the budget model workbook, what we're doing is we're setting a budget version and a budget revision. In addition to that, we're going to have a year that we're budgeting for, let me pull up. I've got this IQMS one. It's a little more relevant here. So we have a budget version, a budget revision, a year, 2016, and a budget period that we want. So if you wanted to do a rolling forecast, you would be able to go ahead and update that for period 2, period 3, period 4, if you're doing quarterly forecasting. In this example, I've got it set so that we can do a monthly forecast. So it'll accommodate both, but what we want to do with this, set the model up and make it so that we could update it for different divisions or different plants or different departments, and then it would actually create a budget entry template that's very similar to what you have today. So by using the spreadsheet server tool, you can populate the historical actuals, bring in maybe some volumes, put all that information in the workbook, and then we'll use the enterprise budgeting tool to distribute those workbooks out and either via email or saved out to a shared server, and allow the users to pick those up and enter their budget and then write it back to a centralized database. So what I did right before we got on is I did a couple of distributions. So I did a distribution by division, and I also did one by company. You could see I was kind of playing around while everybody was getting signed on there. Okay. Now these workbooks that we've already distributed, I could go out as a user and I could pick one of these up. Okay. I've got that budget information tab. It's already locked down for the budget version and revision that it's going to write to, so I can't change any of that. All of that's going to be protected. The year that we're going to plan. One thing that we're going to do with the enterprise budgeting tool is show you how many, we're going to allow you, to have many versions. So you could have 99 different budget versions. You can have as many revisions to any budget as you need. So really an unlimited amount of storage for different scenarios and different comparisons there. And then the budget control part would be your company, your department segment, your division, your e-plant, any of those values. And since we've locked it down, they can only access the information that you've given them in the workbook. Then in this example, I've got some instructions. You probably would do something similar today if you're asking for input. In the examples I'm going to show you today, we're going to have some blue cells that are unprotected, some green ones that are formula protected, and that they're going to be limited so that the only way I can enter information into those is by using the spread capability on the ribbon. And then we're going to have some purplish color protected cells, meaning that those items have been budgeted prior. We're going to display what's already been budgeted in the spreadsheet, but we're not going to allow any changes to be made. So it's just a way for us to display that information so that maybe somebody can get a full picture of what their overhead expense is going to be, but without having to expose it for change and things like that. Okay. The other thing that we're going to talk about is using spread methodology, and this is a very powerful part of the budgeting solution because what it can do is let you create your own basis for calculations. We have some customers that may use the prior 5 years as a trend to predict future periods. If you wanted to have information occur according to a certain cycle, or if you wanted to even base it off of maybe the current year actuals and increase it by a percentage. There's a lot of different options that you have, and it can increase the accuracy of how your seasonality and your budgets occur. So instead of putting in a number and dividing by 12, for instance, you can get a lot more accurate in terms of when things are going to occur based off of how they've occurred maybe in a prior period or off of maybe a particular volume or a revenue item. Okay, So the spread methodology is really just going to use a basis, and you can set up many different versions. So I've just got a couple in this workbook that I want to show that are user-defined. This would be an example of, say, a 52-week spread method where we're just going to divide by the number of weeks, and then we just put the extra week at the last month of the quarter. And here for user-defined 2, I'm just going to divide by 4, and we're going to put an equal amount in the first month of every quarter. And then I could set up maybe my own here where I've got a new product or a new department that's going to come online in period 3. No matter what I put in, I don't want any of the money or units to be budgeted in periods 1 or 2. So it's just going to automatically divide it by 10 and put an equal amount in each of the remaining periods. Okay. So what I want to do is just switch over quickly to budget entry. And I want to talk about the ribbon and some of the things that we can allow users to do. Now, just like Spreadsheet Server, the Enterprise Budgeting tool has its own formulas. So these formulas will allow you to pull information back from the database. So there is a build a template and a formula assistant. And if you want your users to be able to use those formulas and drill down, then that's going to be a feature that you're going to be able to turn on and off for them. Okay. Then there's the spread capability, and you can turn that on and off. So if you don't want them to use it, that's fine. You can certainly turn that off. There's also a limitation here for insert and remove row. So if I were to go in here and try to insert a row, this workbook's been locked down pretty tight, and I'm not going to be able to do that. But by putting some controls around that in the workbook, we can allow people to enter those rows and then at that point put in more detailed information. We can collect that, but not oh gosh, I can't think of a word, I'm sorry, but just not corrupt the formulas. Sorry, I finally got it. Okay. Now the other thing that we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to take the information from the workbook and write it back to the Enterprise Budgeting database. And once it's there, it's going to be available to the formulas that we have in Build a Template. If you don't want your users to be able to write back, you can just ask them to submit the budget book. What that will do is just make a copy of it and put it in a network location. And then from there, as a budget administrator, you would be able to pick it up and you can write it back yourself if that's something that you'd like to do. Okay. Now, the budget administrator has access to some additional capabilities. Budget Express is how you actually build out a budget model. There's a Manage that allows you access to make changes in the workbook, maybe if you needed to adjust it for the next quarter forecast, for instance. Manage is going to allow you to do that. But all of the things that you do are going to be happening within Excel. Okay. Design toggle mode, that's just a way for you to test out what you've just put in. So you can actually test it, make sure it works before you publish it out to various users. All right. Well, in terms of being able to turn all of these features on and off, there's a component of the tool called Database Manager. It's a separate desktop installation, and we'll come back to this, but this would be something that only the budget administrator or administrators would have access to. And then there's some setup, the models and the process center that reside here within the Database Manager. Okay, so let's just talk quickly about some of the features. Let's talk about the spread capability. If you wanted to restrict how users put information in the workbook, spreads is a really great way to do it. It has its own spread window, and then we've got different ways that we can allocate. So you saw that there are some of the examples. If I decided that I wanted to put in $9 million, okay, I can have it just spread that evenly, and it would just divide by the number of periods that I'm doing my budget or forecast over. If I wanted to use the 445, it's just going to do the math, but put that extra week at the last month of each quarter. And then if I decided that I'd like to use my user-defined 2, it will limit that information and only allow me to put it into the last 10 periods. So these are just good ways that you can restrict how they put it in and make sure the allocations are done the way that you'd like. So if I say do $9 million by current year actual, it'll simply look back at that prior year, see how the revenues came in, and then it will make that allocation of the $9 million. And I can update the spreadsheet right from here. Okay, so it's just going to go ahead and insert the $9 million, and when I click enter, then it's just going to move down to the next row that I'm doing my budget for. Okay, and then if I wanted to go in and just say I wanted to do 1.2 million, is that right? 1200. Yep. No. Yeah, that's right. And I can update spreadsheet again, so you can kind of see how you can go in and let your users get the information entered in this way. What I want to do, though, is I'm just going to close down these other workbooks real quick. So let's close this one and this one. Okay. All right. And but if you did want to allow users to go in and enter information, you know, maybe they just wanted to, you know, type in a monthly amount, maybe 10,000 this month, 11,000 this month. You know, you've got a lot of flexibility to let them go ahead and put the information in any way they want. They can copy and paste. They can use formulas. That's really kind of the blue cells that we talked about where they can type that information in. If you wanted to, of course, allow them to go in and enter all the way down the workbook with the spread and not allow them to enter directly into the worksheet, that's entirely your option as well. Now, the other thing that we can do with the insert row, I'm going to show you a couple of different options of using insert row. In some of the questions that we asked you in the beginning, some of it was more related to, say, planning at a lower level of detail. Maybe you're planning your revenues and you're doing that by product, or you've got certain items that are based off of volume, things like that. So think of this as a way to be able to budget at a lower level of detail, and then you could either start from the bottom up, or you could go from the top down. So this is an example of just using a top-down approach where I've already come up with what my product sale number is going to be, and now what I want to do is I just want to allocate it between the products. So I could say product, you know, 1, 2, and 3, and I'll just use Excel to get my 1, 2, and 3 down there, okay? And then it just went ahead and brought down everything down to the first row, so I can go in and I could put 350,000, and maybe I could put 200,000 here, and then if I just wanted to copy and paste it across, okay? So it'll just do the amount missing from detail. And then if I want to make some adjustments, maybe I only want to put 50,000 in this month, 300,000 here. You can go in and you can make those adjustments little by little. And you could continue to add in additional products to take your top level revenue and allocate it down. The other option there is to insert rows and then have it accumulate up to a total. Okay? So, you know, not necessarily starting, you know, with a product sales number, but you may actually be doing, you know, things by material or material type. Or if you are just budgeting volume and then you're computing what your revenue is, and then something else is going to be a percentage of that. Just, you know, keep in mind the whole time you're working here, you're just using Excel, And then what we're going to do is just allow you to insert additional rows, but still not corrupting any formulas, keeping everything in the workbook so that it's going to be not only captured in the workbook, but also written back to that centralized database that you can do all of that reporting from. So you would actually be able to see the product sales, and then you would also be able to see on a drill down, oh, that was allocated out between product 1, 2, and 3. Another option would be if you were doing expenses and you wanted to plan certain items by vendor, and then everything accumulated up to maintenance contracts or to accounting and legal fees. So there are a lot of different options that you have there. Okay. Now the other way that you can allow the insert row feature to help you is that maybe you've used the GXE formula with Spreadsheet Server. So what you've done is you've populated all of the operating expenses that they have historically, but they're going to look at this and they're going to go, oh no, I've got a new account I need to budget. I need to budget donations expense, and you've locked this down. I can't insert it. But what you can do here is you can use the insert row feature to put controls around it to make sure that they're not going to put in an account that's not valid. So this would just look at the spreadsheet and see between that range that you've stated, it will say, oh, okay, these are on the spreadsheet, and these are the other accounts that you can budget for that are not on the spreadsheet. And so for me, let's say I just wanted donations expense, and I want to charge it to marketing, then it's just kind of a drop-down list. And you can add additional options, or you can just have one. It's entirely up to you, all done with the setup. So once I click OK, what you can see is that it inserts my new row for me, and it makes it a blue row. And it doesn't have any history, so it just populates it all with zeros. I like to show this spread option here because a lot of times if you want to allow your users to type in information into certain periods, if you don't want them to use Excel to do that, you can even use this manual spread. So if they wanted to enter information in certain periods, they could go in and they could do it this way, and then they can update the spreadsheet. Okay. And then, of course, if I hit enter, it'll just move down to the next row. I could put in, my amount, $175,000, hit enter, and kind of continue to move through. But if you'll notice, if I went back and I tried to insert another row, donations is not going to show up. I can't add it twice. It's only going to show me those other accounts. If I needed to do repairs and maintenance, then I could go in and I could insert that as an option. So this is a really good way to put controls around it, and don't think that you just have to use it with other operating expense. You could use that with different product families. That would be a good example. Or if maybe you've got new products that you want to introduce, you could actually set up a insert row definition for that. Another option, and I'll show you a screenshot of it towards the end, is being able to use the insert row to do payroll planning, where you can insert new positions or new hires and things like that. Okay, well, let's say that I'm the manager and I'm finished. What I want to do is I want to write this information back to the budget database. Now, my administrator's given me permission to do that, so I can click here. We just have the workbook broken down into different sections where we've got the volume at the top, we've got the sales and cost of sales here, other operating expense towards the bottom, and then this revenue detail is just going to be my product level information. And from here, I can run the write back, and I've been practicing today, so I might get lucky and they all go, but I've been having some problems with the revenue budget detail. So we'll see in just a second. But it's actually communicating with the budget database. So There we go. I got them all in there. So 23 rows were found, 243 were written back to the database. And there's a log that will show you if you've had problems or anything like that. Okay, so at that point, I'm finished, if you want to think of it that way. Now, maybe my budget administrator says, when you're done, I want a copy of your workbook. So you can click on Submit. It says click OK to submit, and I've said OK. And it just says successfully submitted. Now, you have no idea what that means as a user. But as a budget administrator, what you've done is you've designated a place for the workbooks to be stored when they're submitted. And that's the nice part about it, because as soon as you do that, then you've got the tracking capabilities related to it. So what I want to do is just jump over to the database manager quickly, and I do want to show you just a couple of things, but I do want to show you the write back tracking and in that example. So what I'm going to do is just go back here to this sample database, okay, and then I want to click on the Process Center. So if I were to go here and look at write back tracking, I can look at my budget model, and all that is an Excel file, one that I have generated, okay, and then if you'll look at the information, these were all of the workbooks and the different write-backs that were available. Now, I was working in the Company 150 workbook. Those were the 4 areas that I wrote back in that workbook. It says that it's been written back. Here's the time it was done, and if you come over here to the right, you can see who did it. Okay. If you decided that you wanted to write back again, you could do that also. You could come back and you could just say, from a global perspective, you could select all the workbooks and write them back without having to go open it and write it back and close it and save it. It'll automatically do that for you. But the tracking is really nice because it can go in and just say, okay, here's, you can look at it to see, here's when they did it, here's the workbook, here's the user. So you can, kind of keep track of what's going on with your budget there as well. Okay, so let me jump back over here real quick. All right, so what you're looking at is kind of me as the department manager. I'm finished with my budget, but then from a global perspective, you want to be able to see who's entered their budget, what are some of the amounts that have been entered, what are some of the values that we're looking at. All right, and this is just a spreadsheet that's pulling actual information, and it's just going to pull that from your IQMS database. And then I've got the enterprise budgeting formulas that are pulling the information straight out of the enterprise budgeting database. So this was for a budget amount for budget version 1, revision 1. If I were to look here and look and say I wanted to drill down on this, I could actually see here's the information that we budgeted. So product sales, services, intercompany, interest expense, and of course the salaries and benefits. I didn't even mention this, and I'm sorry about that, but I'll go back to it. We also have the ability to store comments that are included on the spreadsheet. Extremely powerful, because if someone were to right-click and say Insert Comment and put that beside of their number in their spreadsheet, a lot of times there's really good information there, but you have to go find that workbook to find what that comment. The nice part about it is during the write-back process, if there was a comment stored in the workbook, it would actually go with that number, and then when you drill down, you would be able to see any related comment to that. But right now what I'm doing is I'm just looking at a consolidated review. We're just looking at net operating income, just using a range of accounts, excluding an account, so all using spreadsheet server syntax. But I'm pulling the actual amount, in this case by using spreadsheet server formulas, and then here I'm just using what had been submitted to the budget database. In this revenue detail, this is another one of those formulas that would allow you to see some of the more detailed information that had been budgeted for different companies. So you could go through and drill down and see maybe new product information, new vendor information, payroll, headcount, things like that. This is just another formula that allows you to bring in information from any type of table that you want to define there within your enterprise budgeting database. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to stop for a second. I talked for a while, and sometimes people do enter information into the chat window or questions, so I'm just going to check there real quick. I don't see anything. And okay, great. All right. Well, I'll change gears quickly, and we will go look at the database manager. Okay. All right. So with the database manager, you have the initial setup of information, and this is where we would bring data in from your IQMS database. So I'm just going to open up this model. Okay. So we would be able to bring over your account segments. In this example, we could bring over your division, your department, your account ID, your e-plant. If there are other segments that you're using your currency, for example, whether you're doing 0001, you have multiple currencies, we can bring that part of your account segment all into the database. And what you're doing is you're just setting up a framework so that you can build out these models so that they'll match what you have in IQMS specifically. And then you've got that ability to create your own budget versions and revisions. This was set up for forecast so that I could do a monthly forecast, and then the budget number 13 is just going to be my annual budget. And so then as I go through and do different iterations of that, you can name them and you can add in additional revisions. So if you wanted to do a period 1 forecast, you know, and you want to have a first pass, second revision, approved version, things like that. As you add in additional budget versions and revisions, you also have the ability to close out or close for write back so that you can protect those and make sure that there are no changes made. So you can actually go in and lock them down at that point. There's also the email settings. For those of you that are using Distribution Manager, you've got the options to integrate with your normal, well, I say normal, but Exchange, Lotus Notes group-wise, but in addition, if you're using Google Mail, you can put in the other specs, and it would work just fine. This is the user settings, and this would be how you are going to manage your users. What I would generally do is I would set up a default user and decide which features I was going to allow them to use, and then I would probably just set up myself and, you know, give myself access to everything. So maybe I just want my default user to write back and submit and maybe use inserts. So you could go ahead and set it up that way. If you need to bring over actuals or quantities, there are tables in the database that you can store that type of information, so we can bring that over if need be. But I would say if you're using Spreadsheet Server, you know, you probably just kind of stick with that. You can also bring in custom tables. So if you have your revenue budget detail, for example, we would actually be able to go in and see the additional fields and values related to that. Another example of using custom tables would be for payroll planning or capital expenditure planning, or it may actually be currency rate translations, or it could be certain drivers related to material cost or direct labor hours. Anything related to that, you can create a custom table, and you can load that information and incorporate it into your formulas. Okay. I'm just going to kind of move along, but we talked about a budget model in the beginning, and I showed you an Excel spreadsheet. all you're really doing is you're just coming into the budget database manager and you're just saying, okay, I'd like to establish a link between my spreadsheet and the database. And so at that point, that communication link is established. Once you click OK, then you've got, as you're working in Excel on that file, it literally is communicating with this enterprise budgeting database. It's communicating with it in terms of your account segments, budget versions and revisions. All of that is going to be synced up with that from the workbook to the database. Now, the Process Center does allow you to do that mass distribution. For example, if you wanted to, go in and look at how I distributed it by division, I just went in and said distribute, and it went in and it created all of my files here in the out file. So there's my by division budget workbooks right there. It saves them in that out folder, and you also have the option to email. So just depending on how you want to use it in your example. And then, of course, you've got the write back tracking, global write back, if you want to think of it that way, where you could write everything back, not allow your users to do that, or if you just want to see what's going on with your workbooks. And so in this example, this is one there I was practicing a little bit ahead of time. And I wasn't quite so lucky. I did have some errors on my write backs. So, but you can, go in and see, oops, that person had a problem. Maybe they need some help, things like that. Okay. Once you're completed with your budget, you can certainly use the formulas with the budgeting tool to retrieve the information in Excel. But if you decide that you would like to get it out, you can just put it in the format that's needed to get it loaded back into your IQMS database. You would just tell it which budget version and revision that you want, and you can just create a delimited file. And you can use any delimiter. I like to use the pipe, for instance, and then you can just save it out as a text file or a CSV file, and then get it imported in that way as well. Okay, so I'll just click Save and click OK. So really what we're trying to do here is just eliminate that need for, managing multiple spreadsheets, trying to accumulate all of that information to do comparisons one to the other. A lot of times you have intertwined workbooks, they're linked. So it's really hard to do those types of comparisons, one versus the other. Now, what I want to do is just show you a couple of examples, mainly just think of those as food for thought. This is an example of a model workbook that we had set up with a customer. And in addition to just having, their cover sheet, their budget information tab with the budget versions and revisions, they also had a budget entry tab. So, similar. It doesn't have to look this way. But they also created payroll input. So when this manager received their workbook, they've got, their standard things that we're asking them for, but we're also going to ask them to give us their payroll plan. So here's all of the managers, people, their direct reports that they need to budget for. And then we also gave them, we created an insert row that went in and said, okay, you need to add a new position. Okay, if you're going to add that, then we need to know last name, first name, job title. Are they full-time or part-time? How much is their pay rate? When are you going to hire them? What are their scheduled hours? So all of those were built in so that they could go in and add, additional hires as the years went on. In addition, there's also computations for the different rates. So this is an old spreadsheet, so the rates are not up to date. But if you needed to do the FICA Max and Medicare, unemployment taxes, if you wanted to do your health care, all of that, based off of how they enter their information, you can just have all of those formulas just be over here in columns that your user never sees. But at that point, you can capture all of that payroll-related, benefit-related information along with maybe your overhead planning, if that's something that you wanted to do, or if it was something completely separate. Okay. I was just going back through the 6 questions. Hopefully I've given some examples of at least shown functionality that could be useful in each one of those. Trying to think if there's anything else that I needed to cover, but I think I'm good as far as showing all that. Okay. Well, I think so. Tanya, did we have slides to wrap up, or have you seen anything come through chat or question that we need to address?
I have not seen anything come through on the chat window. I think everything. I think we've addressed. We certainly can open it up. If you guys do have some questions, we can leverage the chat window now to field a few and wind up the call. If there's something that we've not shown that you have a specific question about, we have a few more minutes, so we'd love to do that. So why don't we give them a couple of minutes to pose a few more questions just in case.
Okay, that sounds great. Let's see. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second to see if I can even get back out here to the chat. Okay, let's see. Well, I do see a question about the licensing, Tanya. Did you want to address that?
Okay. Yes. Now I see that. Sure. Well, hang on. Now
I'll share my screen again, and then you can talk about it. Okay.
Okay. Everything's flipping around here. Okay, I see it now. Sorry, you guys. So is enterprise budgeting a separate module that would need to be purchased? And would all department heads who would need to submit a budget be required to have an IQMS and or EV license? So enterprise budgeting, it is a separate module, and it's a separate add-in that would be installed within Microsoft Excel. And so as Sherry was showing you, there are 2 pieces to the product. So there's the administrator piece that would need to be installed, and that would be, of course, on the administrator's desktop, if you will. And then there is the Excel add-in that would need to be installed. And so the individuals that would need the enterprise budgeting module would be those individuals that from an Excel budget template would like to write the budget data back to the enterprise budgeting database. If the users would ultimately be receiving an Excel budget template, but they would be filling in their results and then just emailing that back to the budget administrator, then they would not need the enterprise budgeting license installed. So it depends on that capability you're providing to those budget, department heads as to whether or not they have that capability to write back to the budget database, or if you have that more centralized. And we do see a mix of that. Some organizations, it's an area that they'd like to improve and to provide, to extend more, accountability, if you will, for the department heads to have a greater autonomy in doing that versus relying on someone on the accounting side of things to upload dynamically. So, and then we have others that like to consolidate it within accounting and may have 4 or 5 accountants responsible for various roll-ups, and they may receive that for various regions or what have you. So it really depends on what your situation is today and the direction you're wanting to head. So Kim, I think that was a question posed by you. Did that answer your question, or again, feel free to pose additional questions in the window here. I see a question, and Sherry, I'm wondering if we could, would it be okay if we unmuted some of the attendees here, if they wanted to speak up and make it interactive? I see that there's one question with regard to how does this work with the forecasting module of IQMS?
Yeah, doesn't give, I mean, if, well, we thought we'd see.
To make it a little faster and more efficient.
I think that's not,
You want to pull up
I
the
got
list?
faster and efficient ways to deal with this.
So was there a question there?
It doesn't really, I mean, it's similar to Spreadsheet Server in the way that it works, but it doesn't really give us a lot of things that we would be able to utilize. I don't.
So I asked him to just help us with summarizing what our open CRN issues are right now with IQ and the ones where we actually have a number assigned to it and who's working on it, presumably. Although a couple of these things have been passed around, over the last couple months. But basically, we're at a point where we've had these issues with the AR for going on a couple of months now. It's like nothing is getting resolved. So we just want to see about how we might work together here to approach them and get this escalated in an appropriate way to actually get it solved. And also just see what you guys think about what you see, in particular you, Gary, so far on their responses. Because I'm a little concerned about the ones where they come back and said, oh, okay, we're working on just writing a script for that. And it's like, that seems to me like kind of a Band-Aid over the problem, but without
So,
Jim knows.
okay. Well, Tanya, I was wondering maybe if we just give the people that were on the call, if they have additional questions or maybe want to know how something would work, maybe we could just ask them to reach out to us. We could get answers back, I guess.
Absolutely, and not yet. That absolutely. I had wanted to, if there was more follow-up questions. I think that we had an issue there with the audio, but I agree. So a couple of things as far as takeaways. We are very excited to talk with you individually and learn more about your budgeting processes. Again, we do want to integrate this further within the IQMS system and bridging the gap between what you already have today with Spreadsheet Server. And so as a follow-up, we will be reaching out to see if you would like a one-on-one presentation where we can more intimately understand your challenges in the budgeting and forecasting process. The other thing I would like to mention is that we will be at the Pinnacle Conference, and that will be coming up in April in Las Vegas, and so we would absolutely love to see you there. We'll have a booth, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and we'll be prepared to present and show you the enterprise budgeting solution that we have while we're there as well. So we absolutely appreciate your time and look forward to collaborating with you further, and hope you all have a nice afternoon. Thanks, Sherry.
All right, thank you.